What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. We are doing our off-road test today on the Rawrr Mantis. If you saw one of our recent videos, we pitted it up against our Sting R in a game of top trumps. The Sting R won most of the categories. So now we are giving the Rawrr a chance to redeem itself in its natural habitat here off-roading. We're gonna do tests on single track, dirt roads, hill climbs, and some jumping as well. We're gonna see if our Sting R can still keep its crown, because that is a pretty sweet bike. So don't forget to subscribe, because we also have a range test coming. Let's get into it.
Let's go.
All right guys, we've had this Mantis for about a week. Huge shout out to Honda World South Jordan here in Utah. They reached out to us and said, hey, come test our Mantis. They're also a Talaria dealer and have a huge shipment of Sting Rs on the way, so you guys can go check them out if you like either of these bikes. We've already been on a few trail rides on this bike because we really wanted to get a good feel for it before we brought the camera out. So we're each gonna take another turn, give you our thoughts and feelings. Let's get into it.
All right guys, this is Reed on the Rawrr Mantis. I'm going first. So I've actually ridden this bike the most since we've gotten it. I've gotten the most used to it. And my first impressions are, it's a pretty good bike. It's very solid built, feels really good. At high speeds, it's very stable. The suspension's okay, not our favorite. I'll get more into that later. But like the stem is really solid, bars feel good, the seat, not too bad. And just the bike, it's a heavier bike, so that helps it be more stable on all this rocky terrain. And you can feel that it's just more comfortable to go faster, I would say. It's not as squirrely when you're hitting big bumps on the front. The whole front end just feels very solid, well put together. The brakes are really good. I'm really liking these brakes. Our Talaria doesn't have that bad of brakes, but these brakes are they're really good. They call them like moto style brakes. I wouldn't say they're moto brakes, but I would say they are better than bike brakes that our Talaria has. So that's a huge upgrade. I don't think you need to upgrade these brakes if you get this bike. On our Talaria, we're already thinking about upgrading our brakes. The battery on this bike and the power is not as good as we were hoping for. The battery dies really fast. It's already at 86%. We've only been out for a few minutes now. And we've been riding it a little bit, like we said, and it dies probably 30 or 40% faster than even our MX3 Talarias, which is crazy because they're almost the same size of battery. And also, it actually feels slower than our MX3 somehow, even though it's running more power. But all in all, I actually am really liking this bike. It's easy to jump on and get going. So this suspension is a KKE suspension, and we are not loving it. The front doesn't feel that good. It feels very soft, which usually we like, but it's kind of too soft and you can't really stiffen it up from what we found. And it's it feels like there's dead space in like the middle of the fork. And when you're going over bumps, it's not that smooth. It just kind of feels bad. And on our Talaria, the new factory fork we actually really like it. It's a good fork. We'll see what happens after we put 1,000 miles on it, see if it's still good. But right now, our Talaria has better suspension. And on the back of this bike is the real problem. I'll show you that. So it's a single pivot design, which we do not like, because when you get off the ground like on a jump, this shock just bottoms out all the way and you hear a clunk. And then when the bike lands on the ground, you hear another clunk from it starting again. On our Talaria, it has a whole pivot, and that doesn't happen. So that's a huge design flaw, which I really don't like. And the back just feels pretty stiff as well. So I would say if you were to buy this bike, upgrade suspension would be huge. It would make it feel so much better. Let's get into these modes it's got. So it's got 3 eco modes and then a sport mode. There's eco 1, 2, and 3. I would say eco 1 is basically unusable. I'm using it right now, full speed, 13 mile an hour. and it doesn't have any torque. Like I just started going up this hill, it's already slowed down to 9, 8. There's no torque in this mode. I'm almost stopped now. Going into Eco 2, it's slightly better, but not really. It goes almost the same speed. Eco 3 is pretty good. It goes, I think it can actually go up to like the top speed of 39, but it doesn't have much torque at all. So it's kind of weird that they did that. I don't like that they added Eco 1 and 2 because it's kind of just more confusing for the rider. The reverse mode is pretty cool. I like that. You just hold the reverse and it just goes backwards if you get into like a sticky situation or something. That's a pretty cool feature. Sport mode. The throttle is really bad right now. We've talked to Rawrr. They said that they're coming out with an update that should be hitting the dealers really soon and to get the throttle updated to make that feel a lot smoother. That's a huge downside we found is the throttle, but that should be fixed if you buy one of these bikes. If you like wheelies, you cannot wheelie this bike to save your life with this throttle that it has right now. So we're really hoping that that tune fixes all that, which they say it will, so it should be good to go after that. All right, so I just remembered another huge downside to this bike that I just noticed again going down that hill. The motor right here. Your peg's here, your motor's here. You hit your ankle on these bolts every time, and it's super uncomfortable. You just hit your ankle right there, and it hurts. It feels terrible. I would say that the weight of this bike is a plus, but also a huge downside. Because when you're going fast, you can feel it's a lot more stable, but also when you're in tight situations, it's harder to maneuver. So if you're okay with the extra weight, it's a plus for going fast, more stable, but then it's harder to maneuver, you know, tight single track trails or whatever. And it just affects the battery as well because it's heavier. All in all, I would say this is a pretty good bike. I would say if I hadn't been on a Talaria before, I'd never ridden an e-bike, I would hop on this and it would be a very fun bike to ride. But since I've been on a Talaria R or even just a Talaria Sting, I would say that's still the better option. And we'll see what Rawrr comes up with in the future. I think they have some huge potential with this bike and more bikes. I think they're gonna come out with some great stuff. So we'll just wait and see if it's better. But as of right now, I would say this bike still does not keep up with the Talaria or a Sur-Ron. This bike to Alex, he hasn't ridden it off-road yet, so we'll get his first impressions. All right, Alex, you're up.
All right, guys, Big Al has gotten on the bike. First thing I notice is that the pegs, I think they're a little bit higher, and I think that the seat is a little bit more comfortable than the Talaria R. The seat is quite a bit bigger and I think has more padding. It's a little weirdly shaped, so it's weird to sit on different places of the seat, but I think it is softer. Oh, I'm liking these brakes. They're quite powerful. I'm gonna slow down and stop up here because I want to go over some of the things that the bike has. To go over is that this bike actually has a chain tensioner that it's bolted on here. It keeps the chain really tight, and I think it makes it quieter. Another thing is, as you can see, that the seat is much bigger. I think it's a lot softer. This battery compartment is actually really solid compared to the Talaria. This battery is so snug in here that I don't think we're gonna have to shim it at all. It's got these rollers here, it's got these padding on either side. I think that this little bit of off-roading testing that we're doing, the R, when we first off-roaded it, the battery started to wiggle, it loosened up super fast, but this, we've ridden it on trails. Lance and Reed have taken it on a ton of different trails, and the battery is solid. It doesn't make any noise, so I really like that. We're gonna not have to do any shimming on that. Also notice that the weight of the bike is quite a lot different from the Talaria, because the Talaria sits at 145 pounds and this one sits at 165. So that 20-pound difference is quite a lot on these trails. On road, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. You can't really tell, but when you're trying to throw the bike around, trying to move, trying to go single track, tight trails, I think that this heavier bike is not going to be as much fun. It also depends on the rider. If you're a bigger rider, if you need just a bigger bike, this might be the one for you.
What's up, guys? This is Lance. I just hopped on the Mantis. Like I said before, I rode this on another trail ride a couple of days ago, so I have a little more experience on it. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it today, but just want to talk about, you know, what I think of it in general. As a whole bike, complete, would I pick the Sting R or the Mantis? That's kind of what I'm going for in this video. So, for me, there's a few reasons why I would pick the Sting R over the Mantis. One of them being the weight. Like, for me, what I like riding tighter single track. I like getting into the techie stuff, and the weight really is a big difference for me. I think 20 pounds is pretty noticeable. And my bike that's not a Sting R, that has lighter suspension on it and stuff, is even lighter than a Sting R. So my bike is actually close to 25, nearly 30 pounds lighter than the Mantis, which is a huge difference. So for personally what I like to do, the Talaria is a better bike for me. So I do think this bike does have a place, and there are people that it would be good for. I think the bigger riders that do want a stiffer, stronger frame, this could be a good option. Although I think the suspension does still limit the bike a little bit. Like we talked about in our Top Trumps video, it's pretty soft and not super supportive. And I only weigh about 180 pounds, which isn't tiny by any means, but there's also a lot larger riders that enjoy riding these bikes. So for me, the suspension's all right, but if I was 240 or 230 pounds, I think it would be way too soft. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. But I think for open dirt roads and things, the longer wheelbase is nice, the stiffer, more supportive frame is nice. The brakes are a big upgrade. I know I'm not braking right now, but they are significantly more powerful than the Talaria Sting and even the Talaria Sting R. We did a brake test in our previous video. You can go check that out. They just have a lot of bite to them. The bike does feel very solid, which is super nice. I noticed that the battery doesn't wobble around like the Talaria Sting. It does need to be said though that this bike just is not as fast and nowhere near as powerful as the Sting R. It just has to be said. I know that they advertise 7.5 kilowatts of power and a 45 mile an hour top speed, but it doesn't achieve those numbers. It just doesn't. Like, you can stick this next to a Sting R and the Sting R just walks away, and it has 8 kilowatts. Coming from a bike that has 6 kilowatts, this barely feels like 6. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think they need to be a bit more conservative on the numbers that they give, and they may be able to do some software updates and get those numbers to where they really need to be to compete with the Sting R. But out on the trail, this bike, it does feel better than we gave it credit the other day in our Top Trumps video. Just because it does feel solid, it does have that nice long wheelbase, it does have the big grippy tires, it does have good torque. Like, I'm not saying the bike is slow, but like, this is full throttle. That was full throttle the whole time. It's just not near as fast as a Sting R. It's still a fun bike to ride. Like, the throttle's really peppy. It's fun to whip around on. It does feel very supportive because of its weight. So I think there is a place for it. But for me personally, I like the Talaria better. That's what I would be spending my money on. And at this point, it's less money, which is also a pretty big deal. Okay, let's go meet up with Reed and Alex over here. See if we can do some jumping on this bike, see how it feels. We've got this little jumper right here. All right, I told him it's time to do some jumping.
All right, yeah, we're good.
Nice.
Jumps pretty good. It lands very smooth, so that's good. We weren't expecting that with this suspension, but
yeah, it took a minute for him to get used to it because it is a heavier bike, and that makes a pretty big difference jumping. But those were pretty smooth.
It's doing good.
Those were smooth.
Very smooth landing.
Nice. Oh, that cased it.
Was a case.
Go, go do it again. Oh, a little better.
This bike's slow. I don't know how it's so much slower than that bike. It's almost the same power.
It's
the weight,
not
the
though.
weight of the bike.
They say it's the same power, but it's just not.
It's so much slower. Like, I'm not even full throttle at all on that bike. Full throttle, I can't even clear it.
All right, guys. So you know this jump we've been hitting right here. We just want to show the huge discrepancy in the power differences between these bikes. The Sting R is supposed to have 8 kilowatts. The Mantis is supposed to have 7.5 kilowatts. We're realizing that Reed can park right here on the Sting R and just launch from 0 and totally clear this jump, like send it further than he needs to go. The Mantis, we can barely clear it with running up this whole corner and holding full throttle the entire way. Let's try it. He easily cleared that. Alex has about 2 bike lengths extra. Let's go.
Cased it.
So he cased it hard. He was probably a whole bike length short, and he had 2 bike lengths more to start.
I was completely floored. I cased the edge of it, and Reed's gonna give it a full throttle point from about where I started. He's gonna fly a couple of feet past where I landed.
Oh, holy cow.
That was huge.
You can just tell he's going faster, like even on camera.
That was almost
Rawrr,
stupid.
you gotta up your power. My friends, you gotta up your power.
Alright guys, we just remembered another major downside to this bike. So we did the same ride today. This one's at 22. This one's still at 54, doing basically the same thing. Also, on this Rawrr at 30%, the speed drops like crazy. You can only go 10, 15 mile an hour after 30%. Whereas this bike still goes almost full speed down to 5%, and you can still have fun. So this will get you home going really slow, but it's just not fun after 30%, which is crazy, and it's already smaller.
All right, guys, thanks for watching so far. We're gonna do a quick recap on comparing the Mantis to the Sting R. As you can see, like, there are some things we like about the Mantis, but all in all, I think the bike might just be a couple years late. Like, it's just not quite ready to be able to compete with the Talaria, especially at the price point that these 2 bikes are. There are still some good things. We're not saying we hate it. We have nothing against Rawrr as a company. We think that they actually have some good stuff coming in the future. We've heard a few rumors. We don't know any specifics, but we're hopeful for them as a company. We think they will be able to compete at some point. We just think the Mantis just isn't quite ready. So we're gonna call the Sting R the winner here because it's the bike we would pick. It's the one we would go out and buy. It's the one we did go out and buy. And I think that just speaks for itself. All right, guys, we really appreciate you watching. Please consider subscribing. Our channel is growing like crazy, and we really have tons more e-bike content on the way. We have more bike reviews coming, more part reviews coming. We've been working with a lot of cool companies. So please subscribe because we are on the way. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you next video. See ya.